Have you ever imagined that the sky over a vibrant city could turn into an unknown battlefield in a matter of moments? The night of February 25, 1942, witnessed an event that remains a perplexing enigma in American history. In the early hours of that dawn, Los Angeles, the city of stars, awoke to a sight no one had ever seen before, or even understood. On that night, an eerie calm settled over the bustling city. The streets were deserted, the lights were off, and a charged anticipation of fear enveloped all residents. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the deafening sound of air raid sirens, and the electricity went out across the entire city. People looked up to see the sky transformed into an inferno of anti-aircraft gunshots, and giant army searchlights turned night into day. For a full hour, the continuous shelling raged without ceasing, and everyone was certain that an aerial attack had begun. But against what? Nothing was clear in the sky, no enemy planes or missiles. All the shots were coming from the American Army's own guns, firing into the void. Then, just as suddenly as everything began, it also stopped, leaving behind confusion and bewilderment. The next morning, newspapers headlined strange news, and the statements from high-ranking officials were shockingly contradictory, opening a floodgate of questions that remained unanswered for decades. What happened that night became one of the most mysterious events in the history of World War II in particular, and America in general. To understand what happened on that mysterious night, let's go back 2.5 months, specifically to December 7, 1941. On that fateful day, America experienced one of the harshest blows in its history. On the morning of that day, the atmosphere at the US naval base in Pearl Harbor was calm, like any ordinary day, but the calm did not last long. Suddenly and without any warning, soldiers were surprised by a squadron of Japanese naval aircraft attacking the base and destroying it in a sudden operation that shook the foundations of America. At that time, Japan was seeking to build a vast empire, but this ambitious goal required natural resources and territories that Japan lacked. Imagine, Japan imported 99% of its oil needs. And with its entry into the war with China in 1937, its oil needs increased dramatically. In 1941, after its occupation of French Indochina, America's response was harsh, freezing Japanese assets in the United States and depriving it of oil purchases. This was a move to twist its arm and force Japan to comply. But the Japanese, with their known stubbornness, decided to seize the oil they needed by force. Thus, they prepared their aircraft and attacked the US fleet in the Pacific, causing enormous losses. This sudden attack awakened the entire country to a terrifying reality. America was not as impenetrable as they had thought. And the scandal spread like wildfire. The next day, December 8, 1941, then US President Franklin Roosevelt stood before Congress and officially declared war on Japan. This declaration radically changed the lives of all Americans. The pampered nation that had lived in security and prosperity suddenly found itself in a total war. Coastal cities began to prepare for any potential attack, and strict security measures were imposed everywhere, to the extent that people became afraid of any loud noise or strange movement, immediately interpreting it as a surprise attack similar to what happened at Pearl Harbor. Overnight, the city transformed into a military garrison. Anti-aircraft guns were scattered everywhere, and fortifications lined the coasts. Regular air raid drills began. The fear of a second Japanese attack was real and palpable on the streets, especially since Japanese submarines were stationed in the Pacific and no one knew their intentions, and shelling could begin at any moment. All coastal cities, from Alaska to San Diego, were on high alert. Imagine. The then US Secretary of War Henry Stimson clearly warned that American cities must be prepared for any enemy attack. And within a few short weeks, life on the West Coast changed completely. Radio stations would cease broadcasting at certain times, and people grew accustomed to turning off lights and drawing curtains to avoid being easy targets, until the nightly blackout became an unavoidable daily routine. And as night fell, the streets would turn into completely deserted roads. So much so that smoking cigarettes in the streets became forbidden, lest their light signal to the enemy. And newspapers gave Los Angeles a frightening nickname, the City of Darkness. In this atmosphere charged with tension, rumors began to spread like wildfire. People circulated news about the presence of spies among them and that a Japanese group was planning an attack within days. Fear reached an exaggerated degree to the extent that the government arrested all Americans of Japanese descent and placed them in special camps pending their fate. This escalation prompted the Japanese, who had previously limited themselves to threats, to decide to escalate their attacks. And what the public did not know at the time was that Japanese submarines were indeed moving along the coasts, and at regular intervals they would sink 1 or 2 ships from the American fleet. Then came the decisive blow on February 23, 1942, confirming to the whole world that the American coasts were no longer safe. On that day, the Japanese submarine I-17 surfaced a few kilometers off Santa Barbara, unnoticed by anyone. At 7:15 p.m., the submarine's artillery opened fire on the Elwood oil field in a bombardment that lasted for a full 20 minutes. More than 15 shells fell on the piers and nearby installations, causing a state of extreme terror and panic. Although the material damage was not extensive and no one was injured, it awakened in Americans the memory of the terror they had experienced during World War I. This attack served as a stark confirmation from the Japanese of their ability to reach anywhere on the American coast. On the evening of February 24, specifically at 7 p.m., the Naval Intelligence issued an urgent statement warning of the possibility of an attack within the next 10 hours. Consequently, the entire coast of Southern California entered a yellow alert status, an alarm indicating the presence of an unknown flying object near the area, requiring immediate preparation for everyone, and at the moment everyone feared an imminent Japanese attack. Something unexpected happened. When the West Coast entered high alert, orders were issued to cut off electricity to all streets in Los Angeles. Since residents had been trained in these procedures, they immediately understood that the city was in grave danger and everyone remained in their homes. But at 1:44 a.m. on February 25, 3 different radar stations detected a strange object approaching Los Angeles. In minutes, anti-aircraft guns entered a green alert status, the highest readiness for repelling any attack, and soldiers began preparing their weapons. After 25 minutes, radar confirmed that the target was only 5 kilometers from the city, leading to air raid sirens blaring across Los Angeles, and everyone was ready for the shelling to begin in minutes. But the shock was immense. Suddenly, the target they were waiting for vanished from all radar screens and did not reappear. But what was even stranger was that despite the object's disappearance, the information center continued to receive reports from civilian and military observers confirming they saw strange objects in the sky. This utterly baffled military command. Should they ignore radar readings and believe eyewitnesses and begin shelling? Or should they wait for the objects to reappear on radar to confirm what they were facing? At 3:07 a.m., the Coastal Defense Battalion received a shocking order: open fire. In an instant, the sky over Los Angeles transformed into an inferno of fire and smoke. The sound of the guns was so tremendous that many people believed bombs were falling on the city. More than 4,800 anti-aircraft shells were fired randomly and in scattered locations into the sky, and their shrapnel rained down on the city. The giant army searchlights were all pointed at the sky, searching for an enemy that did not clearly appear. But the baffling question remained: where was the enemy in the first place? The shelling in the sky was strangely indiscriminate. The artillery was firing at different locations across the entire city. Each military unit saw a completely different target from the others. Some said there were enemy planes appearing in the sky with the flashes of gunfire, and they were firing at them. Some said it was a single plane, and others claimed it was a full squadron of 200 planes. But the strange thing was that at the same time, many witnesses from within the military confirmed that there was nothing in the sky at all. Indeed, even those who were certain they had seen objects gave contradictory accounts. Even the description of the planes themselves was contradictory. Some said they were planes with a structure resembling birds, and others said no, they were objects resembling a balloon or an airship. In short, everyone was following orders and firing, but no one knew what they were firing at. The many contradictions that appeared in the reports on the shape of the objects, their speed, or even their altitude heightened the tension of the situation. Some testimonies confirmed that during the shelling, a flying object hovered along the Santa Monica coast and continued to fly south to Long Beach, but it was flying so slowly that it took a full 30 minutes to cover only 40 kilometers, yet not a single shell hit it. This contradicts the statement of another military unit that confirmed they had spotted the object, fired at it, and seen it burning before their eyes. Who among them was telling the truth? No one knows. At 4:15 a.m., military command issued an order to cease fire. The sky, which had been ablaze with fire and smoke, gradually began to calm down. The stillness held until 7:30 a.m., when authorities announced that the situation was secure. In those few hours, news outlets worked diligently to cover the event. Initial reports indicated that the military had successfully shot down enemy aircraft southwest of Los Angeles, a claim supported by one officer who stated he saw 2 planes explode and fall from the sky. However, the surprise was immense with the break of dawn, when Los Angeles residents emerged to witness the aftermath of the battle. They found nothing but fragments of American military shells. Some homes and cars were damaged by these fragments, but there were no traces of bombs or debris from enemy aircraft. And the claims of casualties resulting from enemy strikes were entirely false. Yes, 5 civilians did indeed die, as reported in newspapers, but these deaths were due to entirely different causes. 3 of them died in car accidents caused by the chaos in the streets, and 2 died from heart attacks due to extreme fear. But the problem that further deepened the public's confusion was that the military officials themselves fundamentally disagreed about what had happened. Franklin Knox, the Secretary of the Navy at the time, held a press conference in Washington the next day and stated that the whole incident was merely a false alarm, and there were no planes or anything of the sort. All this commotion was merely the result of excessive tension and fear due to the previously mentioned events. However, at the same time, Henry Stimson, the Secretary of War, came forward and said that there were at least 15 unidentified aircraft hovering over the area during the bombardment. These contradictory statements caused great confusion in the streets of Los Angeles, and the military command tried to reassure the public, telling them they were making every possible effort to uncover the truth.
The world's preoccupation with World War II meant that what happened on the night of February 25th went largely unnoticed, and no one paid much attention to the details of that night. But after the war ended, the spotlight once again turned to the incident's details, and documents emerged revealing that the U.S. Army had indeed launched a secret investigation. Officers collected testimonies from military personnel and civilians that revealed many interesting details. For example, the artillerymen were not even sure if there was anything in the sky at the time of the shelling. The shelling began when they saw a red flare attached to a balloon over Santa Monica, and immediately afterward, various other units also began firing. And of course, contradictions began to appear. One group swore they had shot down objects from the sky, and another group said there was nothing there at all. A few days later, specifically on March 22nd, an official document was written stating that the shelling resulted from the presence of 1 to 5 unidentified aircraft, presumably belonging to the Japanese Empire. The intriguing part is that when these reports came to light after the war and the incident was re-examined, Japan responded and confirmed that it had not sent any aircraft near Los Angeles on that night at all. Japan had nothing to do with what happened on that night. After 2 full years of research and investigation, in 1948, a new theory emerged that gained significant support. A former U.S. Air Force major and university professor named William Goet conducted a detailed study of the incident and managed to gain full access to all military records related to the matter. He reached a shocking conclusion. Weather balloons were the cause of everything that happened. The evidence supporting the balloon theory was extensive. Firstly, more than 3 officers testified that the target they fired at was a weather balloon. One of them refused to fire after receiving news that a weather balloon had been launched by a unit minutes before the shelling. His testimony was confirmed by an Army general who was aware of the launch of 2 weather balloons near Hollywood. This was a clear and explicit explanation for the testimonies stating that the object was round and moving slowly.
Here, many unanswered questions arise. If all this shelling was indeed caused by 2 weather balloons, what prompted the Army to fire at them with such an enormous amount of firepower, even though they posed no harm? And even if there was harm, and they were just 2 balloons, why this massive quantity of shelling? One would think that 2 slowly moving balloons could be hit with just a few shells, because the matter appears extremely suspicious in this way. In 1949, Colonel John Murphy, who participated in the investigation, wrote an article revealing very important details that supported the balloon theory. He said that the regional observer in San Francisco, upon receiving news of a flying balloon over Los Angeles, misunderstood and assumed that the balloon was a motorized airship belonging to Japan. Consequently, he issued orders to open fire, although he was not authorized to do so. Such a responsibility should lie with the air defense commander, not the observer. Therefore, the mistake was on his part, and he was the one who caused all this commotion. The investigation conducted by the Army itself partially supported this statement, but they nevertheless did not issue a statement confirming the claim definitively. In short, they left it ambiguous so as not to condemn anyone, and left it to the public to believe whatever they wished. And the question that lingered in people's minds after the investigation was, how could soldiers manning huge guns and trained in aiming fire more than 1,400 anti-aircraft shells and not a single one of them hit the balloon? This question led to the emergence of an explanation stating that the shots missed the balloon due to the difficulty in aiming at a target moving horizontally and vertically simultaneously. And the smoke rising from the many shells created the illusion that there were many targets in the sky. This is based on the testimony of the temporary commander, who said that at first he was certain that they were a full squadron of planes, but later discovered that he had been deceived by the excessive smoke in the air caused by the shells fired by the American Army. Thus, we can assume that the events unfolded as follows. A meteorological balloon specialized in weather observations was launched from the station after midnight. The report issued about its launch was misunderstood. The one who misunderstood it thought the balloon was coming from a hostile entity. Then orders were issued to the artillery and the shelling began.
And amidst this chaos, a second balloon was launched, and the whole thing started again. But this explanation does not answer all the questions, and among them is a very important question. How did the balloons disappear from the radars even though they were visible in the sky? And why did the Army continue shelling while the soldiers saw it was just a balloon? What would compel the Army to sacrifice this enormous number of shells for nothing, at a time when the Army desperately needed every bullet and every shell? Unless there was another explanation for what happened that night, and this whole balloon story was just a cover-up. Although a large segment of the public did not believe in the balloon theory, it remained the most convincing explanation throughout the 1940s. But in the mid-1950s and early 1960s, the story took a completely different, even more exciting and intriguing turn. Researchers emerged claiming that the Battle of Los Angeles was not a battle against airplanes or balloons, as was said, but rather the first public and genuine encounter with extraterrestrial beings. They supported this claim with photos taken during the shelling and widely circulated in newspapers at the time. On February 26, 1942, the Los Angeles Times newspaper published a photo on its front page showing beams from 8 giant searchlights converging at a single point in the sky, with a mysterious shape resembling a flying saucer in the center. In the same newspaper, Los Angeles Times correspondent Bill Henry wrote that the strange object withstood direct hits from anti-aircraft artillery. But the irony here is that in the same article, Henry wrote that this strange object resembled a group of balloons flying in the air. However, this did not prevent some people who believed in the conspiracy theory from adopting the flying saucer theory. And this photo became one of the most famous images in the history of American journalism, and many people were convinced that what was in the photo was indeed a flying saucer. But after many years, it was discovered that the photo published in the newspaper had been edited before publication. This further fueled the debate on the subject. It turned out that there were 3 different versions of this photo: the version published on February 26th, which was edited, the original version that was not published, and a third version published after the war in 1945 that was also edited. This information made people begin to question the details of the entire photo. And after they were convinced that what they were seeing was a flying saucer, many people recanted their statements and began to search for a new explanation.
Naturally, these documents were supposed to prove to people that the conspiracy was real, but the exact opposite happened. The proponents of the conspiracy theory themselves split into 2 factions, Shandera's group versus Good's group. Each group claimed their version was the correct one, and the other was a forgery. Instead of trying to prove the authenticity of the documents, they preferred to attack each other. As a result of the confusion that ensued and the strong attack on the military, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, also began investigating the Majestic 12 documents and published 24 pages of the documents on their website, most of them marked with the large black word, fake. Imagine, one of the memos had President Truman's signature pasted on it before being photographed, and another memo was supposedly written by the hand of presidential aide Robert Cutler at a time when Cutler was actually traveling abroad, meaning it was also forged according to their claims. A group of people came forward saying that these documents were part of a disinformation campaign by the Air Force's Special Investigations Office, and the goal was to keep people interested in flying saucers busy with fictitious stories to divert their attention from real secret military aircraft. Why? Because after World War II, many people began to monitor military bases and take secret photos, and the Air Force was concerned that Soviet spies might infiltrate these groups and gather information about American military capabilities. So the plan was that when people claimed to have seen flying saucers, no one would take their claims seriously, and thus the real secret information would remain hidden. An unsolved mystery. What really happened in the skies of Los Angeles? Now, more than 80 years later, the Battle of Los Angeles remains one of the most mysterious events in American military history. Despite all the analyses and investigations conducted, there is no single, fully convincing explanation for what happened that night. Was it a false alarm, and all the shelling was directed at weather balloons? Or was it a provocation by the Japanese, which they deny? Or was it truly a real war with aliens, which the government is trying to conceal? Or, as the Secretary of the Navy stated, was everything merely the result of excessive fear and anxiety? Most of the witnesses to the incident have passed away, and with them, the details of the true events. And as written in an article published in 2011, everyone can find in this story what they wish to believe. The important lesson is that fear and anxiety can make people see and believe anything. What are your thoughts on this mysterious story? Do you believe in the balloon theory, the alien theory, or something else entirely? Share your opinions in the comments below.
Thanks for watching History and its Stories. If you enjoyed the journey, give us a like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit that subscribe button for more tales from the past. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and remember, history isn't just facts, it's full of unforgettable stories.